Nobody warned you about this. Every saloon you've ever seen on screen, the swinging doors, the piano, the whiskey sliding down a polished bar, that's fiction. Carefully constructed, deliberately sold fiction. Because the real saloon wasn't romantic. It wasn't heroic. It was a rotting wooden box where men went to drink poison, lose everything they owned, and sometimes die before morning. And the most disturbing part? The people running those places knew exactly what they were doing, every single night. Right now, the Wild West is having a cultural moment. Yellowstone broke streaming records. Western-themed bars are opening across Europe and the US. Cowboy aesthetics are dominating fashion runways and social media feeds. Millions of people are romanticizing a world they've never actually examined. And that's a problem, because the version being sold to you is missing almost everything that actually happened. In the 1860s and 1870s, the saloon wasn't just a bar. It was the only institution that existed in most frontier towns. No courthouse, no hospital, no church, just a saloon. It served as the post office, the bank, the hotel, the courtroom, and, more often than people admit, the morgue. At the peak of the frontier era, an estimated 100,000 saloons were operating across the United States. In Dodge City, a city with a population of roughly 1,200, over a dozen saloons operated simultaneously. That's not a drinking culture. That's a civilization built on desperation. And once you understand what actually happened inside those walls, the fantasy collapses completely. Start with what was in the glass. Because it wasn't whiskey. Not really. Real whiskey was expensive and nearly impossible to transport across hundreds of miles of desert and mountain terrain. So saloon owners improvised. What they poured was a toxic blend of raw grain alcohol, tobacco juice, burnt sugar, and red pepper, mixed to mimic the color and burn of the real thing. Some bartenders added strychnine, rat poison, in trace amounts to intensify the kick and create the illusion of quality. Men went blind. Men died. And the bartender poured the next round. The term rot gut wasn't colorful slang. It was a clinical description of what the drink actually did to your digestive system over time. Frontier doctors documented cases of liver failure, neurological damage, and sudden death in men who'd been drinking saloon liquor for less than a year. Men lined up every night anyway, because facing the frontier sober was somehow worse. And the women serving those drinks? Their story is even darker than the poison in the glass. Most people assume the women in saloons were there by choice. They weren't. The women who worked these places, called soiled doves, dance hall girls, or sporting women, were mostly runaways, widows, or women abandoned with no legal rights, no property, and no alternatives. They were expected to drink with customers, artificially inflating the bar tab, and many were coerced into prostitution by saloon owners who controlled their housing, their food, and their manufactured debt. The average life expectancy of a dance hall woman on the frontier was 23 years. 23. When they died, from disease, violence, or despair, they were buried in unmarked graves outside the town cemetery. Not respectable enough, even in death, to lie beside the people they'd served every night. That one statistic tells you everything about the frontier. But the men sitting across from those women, they were being robbed just as systematically, just at the card table instead. Every saloon had a card table, and every card table was engineered for one outcome. Professional gamblers, called sharps, traveled circuit routes between frontier towns, working saloons the way a modern con artist works a crowd. They used marked cards, shaved dice, and mirrors hidden in rings to read opponents' hands in real time. Some used planted Confederates at the table to signal cards through subtle gestures. Miners who'd spent 6 months breaking their bodies for gold would lose everything in a single night. Some walked out into the desert and never came back. Others ended it right there at the table. Saloon owners took a percentage of every pot. The house didn't just win. The house designed the game so that losing was the only mathematically inevitable outcome. The men who sat down believed they had a chance. That belief was the product. The cards were just the delivery mechanism. And when the money was gone, the violence started, which the saloon had also quietly prepared for. Hollywood loves a clean gunfight. 2 men, high noon, 1 shot, honor satisfied. Reality was drunk, chaotic, and deeply unglamorous. Most saloon violence wasn't about honor or revenge. It was impaired men with loaded weapons making catastrophic decisions over card games and unpaid tabs. An analysis of frontier court records found that the majority of shootings in saloons were accidental or triggered by disputes over money, not principle. Wyatt Earp, the most mythologized lawman of the era, spent much of his career not fighting outlaws, but working as a saloon bouncer and gambling operator. The line between lawman and criminal was almost non-existent. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral lasted approximately 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That's the entire foundation of Western mythology. And underneath that mythology lies a truth so uncomfortable that society spent a century trying to bury it. The saloon didn't just reflect the Wild West. It built it. The corruption, the lawlessness, the violence that defined the frontier, almost all of it was born inside those 4 walls. Political deals were struck at the bar. Judges were bribed with whiskey. Vigilante mobs assembled in saloons before riding out to hang men who may or may not have been guilty. And yet, the saloon was simultaneously the only place in the West where the social order briefly, chaotically collapsed. Black men and white men drank side by side. Native Americans traded at the bar. Class distinctions dissolved after the second round. For one dangerous, uncontrolled moment in American history, the saloon was the most democratic institution on the continent. Society dismantled it. The prohibition in the United States movement of the early 20th century didn't just target alcohol. It targeted the mixing. The blurring of lines made powerful people deeply uncomfortable. They didn't shut down the saloon because of the drinking. They shut it down because of what happened when the drinking made people forget who they were supposed to be. That's not a historical footnote. That's a pattern that has never stopped repeating. The Wild West wasn't won by heroes. It was endured by desperate people in desperate places, drinking poison, losing everything, burying their dead in unmarked graves, and calling it freedom. The saloon was never the problem. It was the mirror. And every generation since has worked very hard to keep that mirror turned toward the wall. Maybe the real question isn't why the saloon was so dark. Maybe it's why the darkness felt so much like home.